Good morning. I realize I am in the unenviable position of being right before lunch, so I'm going to try to keep this short and sweet and get you to what's waiting on the other side. Quick show of hands, how many of you have watched something on YouTube in the past week? How many of you have watched something on YouTube already this morning? Okay, follow-up question. It's primarily for the students in the room. How many of you have given thought at some point to what it might be like to be a professional YouTuber? Be honest. Yep. So this is pretty wild because I'm 33 years old, and I think back to the time when I was in high school. If you had told me then that there would be a career path available to me where I could literally go make my own videos and actually be successful at doing this, being a social media influencer as a career, I probably would have looked at you like you had snails coming out of your eyes. I couldn't have conceived of what that would even look like. So the point I'm trying to make here is that the technology that we take for granted on a daily basis and things that influence already the career ideas of our young students and young professionals today have already, in less than a generation, completely transformed. So the world changes quickly as a result of technology. That's sort of a given that I think we need to acknowledge. So this is me about 10 years ago. Believe it or not, I actually started out my adult life as a professional opera singer. These are two productions at the world-renowned Jacobs School of Music at Indiana University, Bloomington. And at this time in my life, I was pretty sure that I had it figured out. I got into this terrific music school. I was getting all this great experience, a lot of nice gigs, and I was hopeful that I would be singing at the Metropolitan Opera by age 30 and, maybe, travel the world, do things like that. The field that I'm in now, I didn't even realize was a thing at this point in time. So I wasn't privy to the information that was going to fundamentally transform my own career path. And while I may not have gotten out of the classical music scene as a result of a robot taking my job, I will be impressed today that a robot can outsing like Pavarotti, but I did evolve and make changes as I moved through my career as a result of various factors within myself. So we've established that the world of technology and its impact on people's careers changes and changes rapidly. We as individuals also change throughout our lifespan. I like to tell my students that managing their career is much more like a marathon than a sprint. I think there's this kind of notion that, you get your high school diploma and then you go on to something else, whether it's the trades or college, and you get your certification, you get your job, and it's a handshake and you're set for life, right? That's not really the case, and it hasn't been for a long time. So this is something that, by necessity, human beings throughout their lifespan have to make decisions, have to modify their expectations, develop new skills. This is an iterative, evolving process. So we're going to talk now about, in a world where the targets are moving, both internally and externally, how do we prepare, right? If you've been paying any attention at all to the news over the past several years, chances are good that you've probably seen a headline or two like this. Robot apocalypse, AI is coming to take our jobs, we'll be left with nothing to do, Skynet will come, destroy a few, all of these, kind of doom and gloom apocalyptic scenarios. And while I think most of this is sort of sensationalist clickbait to some extent, I believe there's also a lot of truth to this phenomenon, that we're in a period of massive and accelerating technological change and development, and that's fundamentally changing the way that we as humans relate to work. The global consulting firm, McKinsey & Company, along with lots of other interested parties in this phenomenon, have estimated that 1/3 to well over half of all current jobs in the global economy may be at risk of being either fully automated or at least fundamentally transformed by the year 2030. That's huge. Nearly half of all of the existing occupations that we think of as, paths that we can choose may look very different in just 10 years. So, does that mean then that we're just going to cease to work? That we're going to, end up just, I don't know if you've all seen the movie WALL-E, are we going to be floating out in space, doing nothing but hanging out in our lounge chairs? Well, I like to take a slightly more optimistic approach to this. So, what does it mean for us to be human? It's the theme today, hardwired for humanity. In what ways do we fundamentally, and will always fundamentally, differ from even the most sophisticated technologies? Three things that I would like to cover here. First off, the role that work, vocation, career, whatever you want to call it, plays in the human experience, how the whole concept of work has evolved throughout human history, and finally, to leave you with some things that I believe you can do in the present and throughout your lifespan to successfully adapt to a world that's going to be constantly changing around you. The eminent 20th century psychiatrist, Viktor Frankl, who himself was a Holocaust survivor, lost everything that he cared about in his life, but went on to be a prolific writer in psychology and philosophy, was famous for the study of human meaning, how human beings find purpose in their lives. And the way that Frankl conceptualized human meaning really was that it comes from three sources: through life's relationships, through transcending unavoidable suffering, and through life's work, through vocation. So we're primarily talking about the third one of those today. But because of that, I would posit that work is truly a central aspect of what it means to be human. Ever since the earliest times of human existence, we have found things to do with our time that brought us meaning and purpose. This may look familiar to some of you. The 20th century psychologist Abraham Maslow created what's known as the hierarchy of human needs. And as you look at the bottom of the pyramid, you see what are the very foundational survival needs that every human being has. Food, security, a roof over your head, clothing, etc. And as you move up the pyramid, you see all of these what are called higher order needs, things that really depend on the security of the layers below to be actualized in reality. And so, as you look up and down the pyramid, you can really see where our work, the constructive, generative actions that we use our finite amount of time and energy for, tap into all layers of this model. In fact, to re-emphasize this, so a couple years ago, the Gallup organization, in partnership with Purdue University, released a massive study, a 30-year study on human well-being. Thousands of subjects, all of whom had established successful careers. Many of them had gone to college, and what they found was that they can pretty consistently categorize human well-being into 5 domains. So physical well-being, my health. I myself am getting over a 2-week bout of bronchitis, so I'm not scoring so high on that scale right now. Purpose, well-being, a sense of meaning. Financial, community, and social. So all of these different areas kind of work to give us an overall sense of how we're doing in life. And what was interesting that they found is that there was one factor that had the most statistically significant influence on all of these domains. Any guesses to what it was? You can shout it out. Community, all right, that's a good guess. That's a good guess. Career. Work. Taps into all of those domains and influences them in a profound way that really contributes to our overall thriving. So the concept of work has evolved many, many times, throughout human history, from our earliest days as, nomadic hunter-gatherers through the agricultural discoveries and, early agrarian societies to the massive displacement that occurred during the industrial age. We're now living in what a lot of people would call sort of a second industrial revolution, or the knowledge economy, information age. All of those terms, I think, kind of are used interchangeably. And I think our species has a pretty remarkable capacity for adapting throughout that era of change, whatever it may be. However, individuals like you, like me, we tend to struggle with change. We like to maintain a homeostasis, and so there's I think a legitimate sense of anxiety about everything that's going on, in the global economy. But I want to encourage you that anxiety, while understandable, you're not powerless in this. There are many, many ways that you can prepare yourself for the changing landscape around you by really, again, leaning into those things that are fundamental to your humanity. So when you look back, even just in the last 50 years, the first kind of emergence of robotics in the economy, you see where previously you might have had 100 people on an assembly line, each doing the same job over and over again until the finished product is done. Very first you had robots that could do routine, non-cognitive, so mechanical tasks, right? And they could do it a lot more efficiently, a lot more safely, and a lot more cheaply than human beings. So when that technology became available, a lot of folks had to refigure out what they were going to do. Well, we live in an age now where there are technologies available that are able to displace non-routine cognitive functions, so things that actually require thinking, that are not predictable. My guess is probably most of you have experienced some degree of frustration when you call Comcast or AT&T, and maybe 30 seconds into the call you realize you're not talking to a human being. It's pretty wild, right? So this is already happening. My personal feeling is they've got a long way to go before that's really fully able to replicate what a human can do. But it's happening, and it's going to continue to accelerate. But there are things that technology can't do. There are things that we still are kind of we have the exclusive purview on, I suppose, as human beings. Our capacity for empathy, our capacity for self-reflection, creativity, our capacity for truly, exploring the question of meaning and what our existence is for. So what I would challenge us to strive for is a new Renaissance ideal. For those of you that are familiar with this period in Western history, the Renaissance is known for the flourishing of art and intellectual thought and cultural expression. And I think we have the opportunity to enter into a new Renaissance where we can emphasize multifaceted intelligence that's able to be channeled in different directions as industries change, as the needs of work change, to really adopt a global mindset and an appreciation of growth and learning for its own sake. We may see in 50 to 100 years a new golden age of the arts and humanities, right? Again, these are things that are, at least at present, not able to be displaced by technology. So if we've come to a point where we can assert that vocation, that work is a central aspect of the human experience, and two, that the world of work is always changing as a result of technological evolution, how do we prepare for a future that we don't know what's going to look like? I would give you these three things that I think will increase the likelihood of your being able to adapt and thrive in that ever-changing landscape. The first of which is to read. Read widely. Read regularly. Different genres, different perspectives. There's nothing that is going to inform your worldview and increase your ability to see things from different perspectives than to read things that are challenging to you. I know it's tough because we live in a soundbite culture where I can get information at my fingertips, but there's still a need for us to have a storehouse of well-informed perspectives on things so that we can actually use the mental capacity we have to solve problems in different ways. Expands your cultural cachet, gives you things to talk about that don't require the medium of a screen. Secondly, build authentic relationships. Again, this is the unique purview of humans, to relate to others in a way that is authentic and allows each to see one another in a way that brings validation and recognition of their worth. The really practical side of this is that your impact, your productivity in your career, whatever field you're in, is going to increase in direct proportion to the quality of the relationships you have with your colleagues. So, this is not just sort of a secondary concern. Your ability to advance in your career is going to depend, I would say, both on what you know, but also on who you know. So the quality of your relationships, I would say, is absolutely critical to managing your career well throughout your lifespan. And finally, adopting a mindset of continuous learning. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And so, whatever milestone that you reach, acknowledge and celebrate it for what it is, be content where you are, and also, I don't think these are things that are mutually exclusive, also adopt this mindset of growth. Nobody else can grow you. You have to be the one to take ownership of your own growth. And I'll tell you, the universe of information that you have access to is unprecedented in human history. With the proliferation of self-guided online learning programs, the availability of both in-person and online continuing and higher education options, there's a good chance that you're going to move through a variety of different functions, different industries throughout your lifespan, and so you have to stay sharp, you have to stay current, and use the tools that are at your disposal because nobody else is going to manage your career for you. So, maximize what you have, don't shrink from the challenge. You have agency in this. You don't have to be sort of helpless in the tide of automation that's underway and coming. I would say, your greatest asset is to really own your own strengths and to continuously cultivate those throughout your lifespan. So, if you do these things, if you invest in yourself, if you maximize the unique talents and gifts that you have and connect deeply with others and expand your worldview throughout your lifespan, regardless of the changes in the world of work and how technology changes the hard skills or the specialized knowledge that you need, I believe that you will have a greater likelihood of being the one to own tomorrow, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. Thank you.